Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Lyric Digital Stage Write Out Loud number 10. My name's Gordon McCall. I'm the Artistic and Executive Director of the Lyric Theatre here in downtown Swift Current, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this evening. We are going to have a great evening. We have 5 authors, and I want to thank the Write Out Loud Committee for the job they do in acquiring these authors who join us and turn out these wonderful programs. So thank you to the committee. In just a few seconds, Diane Miller is going to introduce our authors for this evening. Just before we do that, I want to remind us that we stand on Treaty 4 land. Treaty 4 holds the original lands of the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Saulteaux, the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, and it is the homeland of the Métis Nation. Now, we recognize all treaties on all lands, and we want to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we pledge to move forward in a partnership with Indigenous peoples in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. We also stand united with people in our own country and elsewhere who suffer oppression, lack of freedom of expression, lack of human rights, racism, violence. We stand shoulder to shoulder with you in opposition to all of that. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Diane Miller, and she will take us on tonight's journey. Diane, take it away.
Thanks, Gord. I'm Diane Miller, and on behalf of the Write Out Loud Committee, I'd like to introduce this evening's readers. We have 5, and 3 of them I will introduce to you first. Our first reader this evening is Beverly Brenna. She's the author of more than a dozen books for young people. Novels from her Wild Orchid series have earned a Prince Honor and a Dolly Gray Award, as well as an appearance on a Governor General's Literary Award shortlist and CBC's list of young adult books that make you proud to be a Canadian. Bev has also published poetry and short fiction for adults. After spending several years as an elementary classroom and special education teacher, she now works as a faculty member in the College of Education, University of Saskatchewan. Our second reader will be Bruce Rice. Bruce is the current Saskatchewan Poet Laureate and an editor and essayist living in Regina. He writes about community, reclaiming the voices of those who live on the margins, and how we are transformed by landscape even as we leave our footprints on it. Bruce's most recent collection, The Vivian Poems, street photographer Vivian Meyer, is a response to Meyer's life and work. His previous book, The Trouble with Beauty, received the 2015 Saskatchewan Book Award for Poetry, and Life in the Canopy was nominated for Saskatchewan Book of the Year. Third this evening is Angie Abdu. Angie Abdu's works of fiction explore issues of marriage, motherhood, race, and athletics with humor and insight. The Bone Cage, about 2 athletes focused on competing in the Olympics near the end of their careers, was a CBC Canada Reads finalist in 2011. Chatelaine Magazine named Angie's novel In Case I Go one of the most riveting mysteries of 2017. Home Ice, Reflections of a Reluctant Hockey Mom, an honest, humorous, and emotional memoir, is to be followed in April 2021 by a mother-daughter memoir called This One Wild Life. Angie grew up in Moose Jaw and now resides in Fernie, British Columbia, with her husband and 2 children. She teaches courses at the College of the Rockies and is an associate professor of creative writing at Athabasca University. Enjoy Beverly, Bruce, and Angie's readings.
Hello, I'm Beverly Brenna, and I'm very happy to be participating in Write Out Loud's digital stage. I'm an author of a number of books for young people, and I'm going to read to you today from my new middle grade novel, Because of That Crow, published by Red Deer Press. This is a story about a rural family in southern Saskatchewan, Grandpa, Harris's older sister Tessa, and his younger sister Pinky. It's also a story about grief and loss and about a mysterious crow that comes to stay. Chapter 1. Everything was different because of that crow. Harris knew it, and he was pretty sure the others knew it too. Grandpa and Mrs. Featherbuster and Henry and Lucy Harder, and even Tessa. As for Pete, well, Harris figured that old dog probably knew it too, if truth be told. Pinky was the only one who might not remember anything special about that crow, but she was only 3 and didn't understand stuff. Someday she'd find out. When she was older, Harris promised himself he'd tell her everything. It all started early one morning in April. Harris Albert Olson sat up in bed to find a big black crow tapping its beak against the window right beside his head. One moment, Harris was lying with his face pressed into his familiar Edmonton Oilers patchwork quilt, and the next moment, he was looking straight out at something very surprising. The big crow was huddled against the glass, staring at him out of one beady black eye. "Quit it," Harris mumbled. "I'm trying to sleep." Harris wasn't really trying to sleep. He'd been awake for at least an hour, trying to push away all the things he didn't want to think about, just as he'd been doing since the accident that killed his mom and dad 3 years ago. Last month had been the anniversary of their death, and Grandpa had taken them all out to the cemetery to pay their respects. Tessa placed a few crocuses beside the headstone, and Pinky blew bubbles from the jar of bubble soap that Grandpa had brought for her. But Harris kept his fists in his pockets, and he tried to think about anything except the night they died, because he knew it was his fault. Their dying was all his fault. Harris jumped out of bed and flapped his arms at the crow, trying to scare it, but the crow kept tapping, and it looked mean, as much as anything could look mean when you only saw one eye. Harris shut the curtain, but he could still hear it. Tap, 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 tap. So he opened the curtain and he shoved at the window. He shoved at that old window as hard as he could, but it wouldn't budge. At least, not at first. The ice had been gone from the prairies for a couple of weeks now, and as far as Harris could see, nothing around the glass was frozen up. He wiggled the handle and pushed again, and with a sudden burst, the window slid wide open and the crow torpedoed out toward the field. But before Harris could close the window, that crow, a big frowsy hulk of a thing with a pointed black beak and dark wrinkled feet, that crow flew into the open window and right in Harris's bedroom. When it landed on his carpet with a solid kind of thud, Harris leaned back and grabbed his quilt. He pulled it right up over his face, and then he pulled it down a bit so he could see. And then he stared, transfixed, at the pointed black beak and the sharp, sharp claws, and he waited for something bad to happen. What happened wasn't what Harris expected. What happened was that the crow got stuck. Its claws dug into the little braided rug beside the bed, and when it tried to fly, the rug held fast. The bird flapped harder. It flapped furiously. Finally, it raised itself a few inches into the air, but the rug came with it. Harris laughed. He couldn't help it. The crow looked like one of those stuffed birds in the school library, the ones with glass eyes and their feet glued onto slabs of wood. When Mrs. London, the librarian, moved those stuffed birds around, she'd talk to them. "You won't mind this, Henrietta, my dear," she'd tell the brown partridge before she shoved it to the side to make room for books. Harris laughed at the crow and his rug, and he kept on laughing. The crow turned his head and shot him such an aggrieved glance The Harris grew serious right away. It was clear that this was no laughing matter, at least no laughing matter to the crow. Its eyes, mean looking through the window, really just looked sad, and its feathers were bedraggled. Even the fluff on the top of its head seemed down on its luck, sticking up in a few stingy clumps, without fully covering what Harris saw now was a bald patch at the back. After a period of frenzied flapping that got it nowhere, the crow kind of crumpled onto the rug and dropped its head as if it were executing a deep curtsy before a king or queen. Harris waited a moment. Then he slipped out of bed and knelt down. The crow didn't move. "I'll unhook you," Harris said. "I'll unhook you if you just stay still, and no pecking." The crow lifted its head and fixed him with a watery stare, but it didn't look angry. Harris stared back. He waited another moment, and then, picking up one wrinkled toe after the other, Harris set the crow free. As soon as both feet had been disconnected from the rug, the crow straightened up, as if gathering what was left of its dignity, and then it hopped out the door of Harris's bedroom. "Oh no," Harris called. "No, you can't go out there." But it was too late. The crow was already bouncing along the hallway and then flapping down the stairs. By the time Harris reached the main floor, the crow had perched itself on top of the kitchen cupboards beside Grandpa's old china rooster, and there it stayed. "Caw," it said rather triumphantly. "Caw, caw." Harris tried everything he could think of. He opened the kitchen door that led onto the deck. He climbed onto a chair and waved his arms. He squirted water from the toy gun Pinky had left by the sink. But nothing ruffled even a single feather on that crow. It sat on top of the kitchen cupboards and kept its wings tightly folded at its sides. And as much as a bird can look pleased with itself, that crow looked pleased. Harris ran into the front porch to get the broom, intending to sweep that crow outside once and for all. But it was too late. Grandpa was at the foot of the stairs. His thick gray hair was sticking out like porcupine quills, and he was eating a handful of chocolate chips. "Who the heck left the back door open?" Grandpa said. "Harris? Tessa? What's going on?" And then Grandpa yelled from the kitchen, "And who let this dirty crow in here?" Then Pinky appeared. One moment she was on the top step, wrapped up tight in her red and white quilt, and the next moment she was sliding all the way down. Good thing she had lots of padding. She landed with a heavy thump on the floor in front of Harris, but she didn't cry. "That didn't hurt," hollered Pinky, throwing off the quilt and clambering to her feet. Good old Pinky, thought Harris. She never cried, not like the other little kids Harris knew, who seemed to be crying all the time. Harris could see that Pinky was wearing 3 of his old t-shirts, the red one on top, with skinny red pajama bottoms sticking out underneath. She looked just like a giant strawberry, big at one end and little at the other. "How did this dirty crow get inside?" Grandpa yelled again. I don't know," said Harris, bursting into the kitchen. "I was just going to try to get it out." "You don't know? You don't suppose that when you left the back door open, that crow just flew right in?" Grandpa said. "No, I didn't," started Harris, but it was no use arguing with Grandpa. Grandpa grabbed the broom and started jabbing at the crow. It took off and flapped around the room, and then it headed into the living room, with Grandpa running after it. "Bird," said Pinky. "Bluebird." "No, it's black," Harris told her. "It's a crow, a big black crow." "Bluebird," said Pinky, edging up to the table and pulling her quilt behind her. "Why is everything so loud down there?" yelled Tessa from the upstairs hallway, slamming herself into the bathroom. "Don't you know some people aren't awake?" Suddenly, the crow came hurtling out of the living room with Grandpa right behind it. This time it went straight out the open back door and disappeared off the deck. Grandpa banged the door shut. "And stay out," he yelled. Then he looked at Harris. "You kids are a pile of trouble, you know that?" he grumbled. "A pile of trouble all the time." But he kind of chuckled as he said it, as if this kind of trouble wasn't so bad. Pinky tugged on Harris's little finger. She tugged hard, and Harris burped, just like always. Then Tessa yelled down from the bathroom, "You're disgusting!" And Harris called back, "No, you're disgusting." And the day had begun for everyone in the household. It had begun in earnest. Grandpa slammed around making his super deluxe eggs with bacon. The eggs had cheese and parsley in there. That's what made them so special. Harris's mouth began to water at the sight of them, and he raced upstairs to get dressed. First, however, he peeked into Tessa's room and saw the jewelry box lying on her bed. It was right on top of her quilt. The box was locked, as usual. He wished he knew what was in it. Tessa never let him look, no matter how often he asked. Harris went back into his room thinking about that, thinking about what was in Tessa's secret box. As Harris threw on his clothes, Pinky galloped in to eyeball Chomper. Chomper was a rainbow guppy that had miraculously survived a broken tank, the glass violently cracked during a game of floor hockey a few weeks ago. Now Chomper swam in lazy circles in the smaller tank that Harris was renting from Tessa for 25 cents a week. Pinky stared at the fish, and then she took a sloppy drink from the mug of water that Harris kept beside his bed. "Hey, no fair, Pink," Harris laughed. He shook his finger at her, and then he tossed fish food into the tank for Chomper's breakfast. Pinky watched the guppy intently for a few moments, and then she crawled onto the oiler's quilt and pretended to be sleeping. But she kept one eye squinted open, following Harris. Harris sat down at his desk and looked at the drawing he'd been doing on a sheet of poster paper. He could hear birds chirping outside. There were robins whistling and chickadees rasping, dee-dee-dee. Then a meadowlark added its warbling trill. In the drawing stood Tessa with her long blonde hair and her cell phone. She was almost 13. Harris was beside her, and he'd made sure to include the freckles on his nose and his spiky red hair sticking up all over. He was 3 years younger and a fair bit shorter than Tessa. And then there was Pinky, 3 years old, with pretty much no hair at all, just white blonde fluff on top and one big curl at the back of her neck that didn't hardly show. She used to have a lot of curls all over her head, but one day she blocked herself giggling into the bathroom with her new plastic scissors, and snip-snap, the curls had come off. "Pinky," she said now, tiptoeing over beside his chair and patting the picture. "Yep, that's you," Harris told her. "Look how bald you are." "Bald," said Pinky. "That's what you are because you don't have much hair," he added. "Bald," said Pinky. "Bald hair." As Harris looked at the drawing, he realized it wasn't nearly finished. Grandpa should be in it. But Harris didn't want to draw him without Grandma. They were together in all the photos, and somehow it wouldn't look right putting him in here without her. But Grandpa never talked about her, not since she died 4 years ago. Harris didn't feel right about leaving her out, but he also didn't feel right about putting her in. So that left one big empty space. And the drawing had another big empty space where Mom and Dad should be. But they'd been gone so long that it didn't seem right to include them either. After all, Pinky, her real name was Ruth, was just a baby when they died. Harris had been in grade 1 and Tessa in grade 4. The three of them had changed a lot in 3 years. Harris couldn't imagine his parents beside them now. In fact, he couldn't really imagine his parents at all. Harris felt a wave of sadness wash over him, and then another. He tried to think about something else, something other than his parents and what had happened that terrible night. But the tide of despair rose up around his chest, and for a moment he lost his footing and struggled to catch his breath. Then the meadowlark trilled again, and Harris heard the single pure note of the mourning dove that lived over in the woodlot. And just as quickly as he'd been swept out into deep water, he was back on solid ground, a bit shaky, but here nevertheless. He looked out his bedroom window at the springtime world of stubble fields and pasture land. budding trees, dusty roads, and the nearby marsh from where he could just make out the gabbling of wild geese. No crows, though. He couldn't hear any crows. Suddenly, just as if someone had opened a window, the memories of the accident came flying back, because Harris had been in the car with his mom and dad. He had been right there when the drunk driver swerved onto their side of the road and smashed into them. Harris thought feverishly about that crow. He thought about the dull shine of its feathers and its wrinkled feet and the little bald patch on the back of its head. He reached for that crow the way a drowning person might grab onto a rope, and he picked up his pencil again. Maybe he would draw the crow. Maybe he would draw it just as it had looked, standing on the rug in his bedroom. But then he thought about how the crow would never come back, and he paused, uncertainly. "It'll never come back," he said to himself, "so what's the use?" And then he stood up and slammed his bedroom window. "That crow is gone for good," he thought. But Harris was wrong. He was definitely wrong about that. So chapter 2 goes through breakfast and the special eggs and bacon that Grandpa makes, and an argument that Tessa has with Grandpa about going to the school dance that night and staying out till midnight. A lot of these scenarios from the book are based on real experiences I had with my family raising 3 kids on an acreage south of Saskatoon. This story is imagined, but a lot of these instances, the guppy, the dog named Pete that comes in later in the book, they're based on real life. So this chapter goes along, chapter 2, until they are waiting for the school bus, Harris and Tessa. And as they're waiting for the school bus, Harris looks over into the woodlot and he sees a flash of dark wings. He turns and looks up. A crow was flying overhead toward the woodlot where Harris could see other crows roosting in the bare poplars. As Harris watched, a couple of the bigger birds darted forward, flapping and pecking at the newcomer, who immediately swerved back toward Harris and Tessa. As the school bus lurched to a halt beside them, the crow flew past again and perched on top of a fence post. "It's you," cried Harris. "You're back." The crow watched as they climbed onto the bus, and then it seemed to be staring in at Mrs. Jessup, the bus driver. When the bus moved forward, the crow flew alongside, looking through the window at Harris. When the bus reached top speed, Harris lost sight of the bird, but he had the feeling it was up there, flying just above the bus, watching over. Harris had the feeling that crow was watching over him, but he didn't know why. So this book is really about sadness, and it's about the idea that sadness isn't something that needs to stay with you, that positive experiences can repair the tough things that occur in life. When Harris opens his window for this crow, he also opens himself up to a gradual healing process, and he learns also how others can overcome the dark feelings that often drag them down. So I wish you all well and all the best.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bruce Rice, and I'm doing this from Regina, which is on Treaty 4 territory. Treaty 4 is the traditional territory of the Saulteaux, Nakota, Lakota, Dakota, and Cree people, and also the homeland of the Métis. And I salute the original storytellers and also our current ones, some of whom we have tonight. Since about, I'd say, the last 3 of my books have a fair amount owing to the southwest of the province, I thought I'd like to read a poem about a place where I've been going to an informal artist retreat. It's called the Mitchell Place, and it's in the Brady Coulee just outside of East End. And it's about how artists talk and how I was allowed to be the poet following them around as they traipse through the coulees and up the hills doing their on-plan air work. So the Mitchell Place. As far west as you can go, because once There was no border, just an ending of trails, and wherever you were was where you began. A town like East End. The talk this morning on the wraparound veranda of the Eaton's house of altitudes, how the Quechua people of Peru chew coca leaves for altitude sickness, but also to kill the hunger. On the downward slope of the Rockies, 3,500 feet above sea level, we speak of the flooding this year. Splintered houses, children's toys, and manure from farms in Grand Forks washing into Manitoba fields. Heavy snows in BC. Strange times and strange weather, but no one is fooled. The water will stay, and next year will start where this one ended. You could say this is how artists talk, but it's how everyone talks. A tide that reverses itself in the channels. Fish spawn in the campgrounds. Land we used to till, gone back to ocean. I leave it at that. Climb into the hills where everything meets in the middle. The soft effusion of flowers, wingtips held in the current that comes up the butte. Like a comma dropped on the ground, or a rib wrapped in mother of pearl, an ammonite. I kicked the clay with my heel, a layer of cinders from some ancient fire. I am shadowed by the scree of a hawk that eventually loses interest and spirals black into blue. Way up here, you hear everything. A roistering tail of dust follows a black speck out of town. There is no easy way home. Grasses whip my knees. A greasy path of rocks strewn where water coursed downhill in a wild rain. I make it back to the house, a row of skulls on the rail, eye sockets, facing east so the land can enter them. This is a country of talismans, horseshoes, and crow's feet nailed to a shed. Machines and buildings dissolve into the rust in their nature. The table set, we talk like we always do. No one, not even the erudite cook, seems to know the names of the clumped blue-stemmed grasses. Wine spills as purple martins dive bomb the dinner guests, and laughter rolls through the sky, more echo than thunder. And my daughter lives in Toronto, and she was home a little while ago and brought back a lovely package of oolong tea. And so this is a poem inspired by that, and this blue cup, which I love to use for the tea. So use everything you can, folks, in a poem. This is numbered. 1. From the high part of the mountain, as far as plow or history can reach, black husks of oolong, dried, in no way auspicious, but expensive, rattle in the jar I've been using for a teapot. The ghosts of leaves uncurl when the boiling water hits them, and their past lives magnify against the glass, a paradox of wholeness in a floating forest where all the birds are dark green. 2. Main Street so-called, the boys' allowance on the counter of the Po Cafe, where the owner has memorized all the English on the menu and asks no questions. The kid practicing to be an adult pours tea that spills from the lid of a cheap steel pot as the porcelain peacock next to the cash register poses the way a person does when they're free, to eat whenever they want, a pot of tea to themselves they don't have to share. 3. The water almost clear, a blue cup. Taste more like a faint touch to the sides of my tongue. I've been drinking oolong, going through the motions, of the one to be looked after. How could she know? My daughter's gift, the tea. She's the mysterious one, wandering aromatic shops, cafes so small they have no signs, you have to know the door. The tea is never the same. The slight infusion of mountain and earth in the water. It's there in the cup. My daughter grown, change on the counter. Her father, home. And finally, I'd like to read a couple of poems from my new book, The Vivian Poems, a street photographer, Vivian Meyer. It's spelled M-A-I-E-R, so you can find a great website with some of these images online. Dean Bosch in East End helped design the cover, so thanks to him and thanks to Radiant Book Press for doing this, and they also have some of my other books. But Vivian worked as a nanny for well-to-do families in Toronto. She actually traveled whenever she had a real chance to do so, including coming to Canada. And it looks like she probably crossed at least from Quebec to British Columbia. So this poem is called Smile because she had this knack of catching people in those moments in between when they didn't have the mask up, when they were most being themselves, either vulnerable or in a good place, sometimes doing something with an ironic meaning. But here's Smile. 1. Before they speak, people who don't know me smile anyway. There's nothing of theirs I can take. The poor always surprise with their good cheer. The Saint Bonnet girl with hazel eyes clings to her dolly. I speak French in that come-along voice my mother used. Where did that come from? The child finally smiles, an honest one the world hasn't reached. One of the lucky few who wear no mask. 2. An auburn-haired mother looks into my Rolly, her Rolleiflex camera. Her daughter and even the baby seem skeptical. It's not that this woman's life is set. She looks in my eyes. The smile's not for me. It's for them. They don't even see it. 3. People like to show their teeth. Gold ones, chipped or stained, scored even. A farmhand looks up as he pours milk into a gleaming separator. Lucky teeth, buck teeth, young girls in calico. Sometimes I think I could lift what they lift, squinting into the sunlight. A door frame to hold up a smile. 4. I'm often cast as today's glad adventure. Some of them fret about the end of the month, bastard men, and who I am. They'd rather not bother, ashamed to be unfit citizens of this poor but happy earth. 5. I envy the grace of the Saint-Mager. How dreary those snapshots, the ones of rustic lives, the wisdom of age, etc. Themselves they would laugh. La sagesse, c'est pour les prêtres. Wisdom's for priests. A face is a face. And it's hard to say who has lived well and who simply waits for the final punctuation. 6. It's not mine to say who is more honest, the person who's happy or the one who never is. I never smile for a camera. Smiles are for family albums. But some days I find a luminous thing. This beautiful Malayan smiles with her skin. I've bought her camphor wood box. She waits by a stall where the honey's heated and thinned. How patient she's been. A smile to recall when I'm home, beneath the dome of a formerly grand station. or in some ancient place where the rain has stroked the walls smooth. And Vivian, in her collection, there was a lot of Super 8 films, and I managed to have a look at some of these. But this is the last poem I'll read. It's from a section called They Could Be Vivian, because you got the impression these were the counterpoints to Vivian, in some ways a projection of who she was. So this is just the first one, Film 1, Mystery Mink Coat Woman. It's too warm for my coat. My lipstick might be smudged, but time is what's urgent. So much and no more to catch the walk light. A month to my anniversary. 25 years, that's a mortgage. But my hair color will get me through. My address, Highland Park. My situation's a blur, peripheral like this flower bed or lines in the road. Things you think about later. I know you are looking because of my style, because it is me. It's not your fault. You want to see me, but now I really must go. It's time I must go. And it's time I must go. So thanks everyone, and thanks again, Lyric Theater and my fellow writers.
Hi, I'm Angie Abdu, and I'm coming to you from the Rocky Mountains, where I live along the Alberta and BC border. And I'm a university professor at Athabasca University, where I teach creative writing. But I'm a Saskatchewan girl at heart, born and raised in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and I'm very happy to be coming to you in Swift Current. I recently finished reading Lorna Crozier's new book, Through the Garden, a love story with cats. And that she always makes me think of Swift Current. It makes me a little homesick. So I wish I were really coming to Swift Current, but here I am coming virtually. I'm going to read to you from my most recent book, Home Ice: Reflections of a Reluctant Hockey Mom. I typically write fiction. Here's my fiction books I've written, and I sometimes write academic work, particularly on sport literature, Canadian sport literature. But today I'm going to read from my first and so far only memoir. And almost a year ago, I was in San Miguel, Mexico, back when we used to travel, February, for their big writers festival. And Marilyn Simmons, it was Valentine's Day, so she challenged us to read about love. And she said, it doesn't have to be romantic love, it can be any kind of love. So I started thinking, I wonder how many kinds of love there are in this book. And so we only had 10 minutes each, and I read about 4 different kinds of love. So that's what I'm going to do, 4 very short readings, and I'll leave you to deduce what kind of love I'm reading about in each. 1. Let me tell you about Ollie. He's different. That's what his teachers tell me. His teachers who work in a system that is hell bent on making kids the same. Ollie shakes his hand and chews his shirt. Dr. Google tells me both can be symptoms of autism and/or stress anxiety disorder. Ollie has an inflexible and inflammatory sense of justice. He wants things to be right and fair. He's especially big on fairness. He wants people to be good and fair. When he inevitably runs up against not good and not fair, he gets emotional. To this day, he has not forgiven our neighbor, Chrissy C., who, at 2 years old, right in front of Ollie in our driveway, killed a grasshopper. That happened when Ollie was 4. Now he's 9, and the incident still brings him to tears. That dead bug and the murderous Chrissy C. keep him awake at night. That grasshopper was my friend, he says. It might have had a family. Why would she do that? I once told my dad that reading to children increases their empathy. He responded, I can see that. And you're creating an Ollie in a world of no more Ollies. So maybe it's my fault that Ollie is too sensitive for a hockey locker room. At the start of last season, Adam year 1, the boys were charging around the dressing room in their underwear, roaring and hitting each other with their sticks. One of these boys is Quinn. I make a habit of being friendly with these boys and learning their names just to be sure they realize that I am watching them and I know who they are and they had better be nice to my boy. So Quinn stomped on a spider. The boys all hollered over the impressive display of blood and guts and gore. I tried to position myself between Ollie and the scene. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. I tried to put the words in my expression as I met his eyes and held my hands lightly to his cheeks. Please, Ollie, please don't cry. It's not that I believe boys can't cry. It's not that I'm trying to enforce a hypermasculine code of conduct. It's not that I don't understand how harmful gender stereotypes can be. It's simply that I do not want these boys making fun of Ollie. Mom, Ollie said, his eyes already brimming, his mouth twisting the way it does just before he loses the battle with his gargantuan emotions. Why? He wrung his hands. Why would they do that? It's okay, Ollie. Let's just get your skates on. The boys were already looking our way, still in their underwear, sticks frozen overhead. But the spider is dead, Ollie said, holding himself together, though the quiver in his voice and the tears on his cheeks hinted that his composure might not last. There's no reason to kill a living thing, he continued. Unless maybe if, like, you're going to make a steak or something. That's Ollie. Being a human is hard. Ollie understands ethical conflict. He lives it every single day. Phew. Mom, you are the swimmer. I am the hockey player. I'm suspicious of Ollie's phrasing. It's not just about playing hockey, it's about being a hockey player. I've seen how this yoking of identity in sport can be destructive. But you still like playing hockey, I ask, right? You think hockey is fun? Of course I like playing hockey. It's my favorite sport. I love it, he says. If you love it. That's been my mantra. I tell Ollie I will pay the hockey bills and I will sacrifice my weekends and I will brave the icy highways and I will chaperone the crazed 9-year-olds. I will put up with the cowbells and the shrieking moms and the angry dads. I will do it all as long as Ollie loves it. But the first time he whines or sulks, the first time he drags his butt about going to practice, the first time he complains about spending a weekend at a tournament, we are done. The first time he only kinda likes it, finished. I've made that rule perfectly clear. We do this hockey thing only for love and only for his love. But what does that mean to love a sport? As a recovering medievalist, I've always been fond of Aristotle's definition of love. Love draws things together. The rock loves the ground. If you drop a rock, it's drawn to the ground. A rock cannot resist the ground. That's love. Rock loves ground. I picture Ollie rolling his eyes. That's not love, that's gravity. But maybe love is a lot like gravity, a force of nature, impossible to resist, intrinsic to the workings of everything, even if we never see it. Fame and fortune are exactly the wrong reasons to write. I tell my students only be a writer if you really can't help it, if you love writing. I'm talking about the same kind of Aristotelian love that I hope draws Ollie to hockey. If you're drawn to writing, like an apple is drawn to the ground, if writing's gravitational pull on you is irresistible, then write. 3. On Thomas's last day in Canada, we visit a backcountry lodge accessible only by snowcat. We sit side by side at the back bench of the cat, our hands not touching, our knees not touching, our feet not touching. As the treaded machine carries us up the steep slope through the old growth cedar forest and above the clouds, Thomas asked me about my past in sports. Did you like coaching swimming? I loved it. I realized my love only as I declare it. I love teaching swimming far more than I like teaching writing, I add. He's surprised and asked me to elaborate. Because you can actually teach someone how to swim. You tell them what to do and they do it. They practice until they get it right. Then you tell them the next thing and they get that too. And then they can swim. We laugh, recognizing the immediate utility of this skill in comparison to the creative writing skills we teach. He extrapolates my swimming analogy into an imagined writing workshop. You're still drowning, but you're drowning more slowly now. Or you're still drowning, but this time at least you didn't take us all down with you. It's lovely, crawling through the old growth forest, laughing with a man who shares my passions, who understands what I do for a living, a man with whom I will never have a single conversation about credit card bills or school report cards or household chores or hockey camp, a man who is not my husband. 4. At the rink, I expect my husband to look at the bags under my bloodshot eyes and greet me with a snarky, quality parenting, Ange. Instead, he smiles my way, and all the other parents throw their arms in the air to celebrate my mid-game arrival. Angie, you're here! Sharon, Melissa, Amanda, Vivian, all these hockey mums. This far into the season, they've become a family of sorts. I'm here, I mirror their enthusiasm, flinging my arms above my head. Wow, Marty says, pushing down the bench to give me his warm spot. You're popular. Nobody does that when I show up. You're like Norm from Cheers, the hockey arena, the place where everyone knows your name. I expect that once my arrival excuses Marty from hockey duties, he will race off to the ski hill to get in a few fast runs before he has to go find our daughter Katie. But instead, he puts his arm around me and pulls me close to his side. Together, we watch our son play. As hard as marriage is, and as easy it is to fantasize about the intellectual and artistic life I might have with one of the brilliant men I meet on the conference circuit, nobody else would do this with me. No other man in the world would sit with me and proudly watch my B team third line player. Nobody else would love Ollie like I do. If Marty had caught me in my conniving, in my deliberate and self serving manipulation of the schedule, even if he had publicly scolded me for my hangover, I could not feel worse than I do now, with his arm wrapped tightly around me. Nothing could make me feel as bad this morning as his kindness and his love do. His shared enthusiasm for Ollie's sport drowns me in guilt. Thanks, I say, putting my hand on his knee and slowly running it up and down his quad. The fastest kicker on our varsity swim team, he still has strong legs. In recent years, he has complained that I never touch him anymore. He looks at me surprised now, his face softening, reminding me of the way we used to look at each other 15 years ago. Thanks for what? He's handsome when he smiles. He shares Ollie's implausible moss green eyes. For doing everything I say, for all you do, I appreciate it. He's confused by my rare articulation of gratitude, but he'll take it. He slides his hand down my waist and scooches me his way until our hips touch. He kisses my cheek. Thanks, I say. It's the way Ollie said thank you back when he was 2 years old. We still copy him when we're feeling sentimental or vulnerable or scared. Thanks. And that's Love in Home Ice, Reflections of a Reluctant Hockey Mom. And I wanted to share with you a picture of my forthcoming book, which is going to be out in April. And it's sort of a follow-up to Home Ice, but it's focused on me and my daughter and hiking. This One Wild Life, a mother-daughter wilderness memoir, out April 13th. And I hope that you will like it. It should be available anywhere fine books are sold, your independent bookseller or online. Best of luck with everything in Swift Current, and thank you for listening. Bye.
Thank you, Bev, Bruce, and Angie, for sharing your creative insights. Our final two readers are C.J. Buehler and Jane Byers. During his career with the Canadian Air Force, Chris Buehler traveled all of North America, encountering a generous measure of life and death drama. Upon reflection, he wanted to share some of those experiences, while commenting upon how we perceive the world and our place in it. His debut novel, We Are Still Here, was part mystery and part dystopian prophecy. His latest book, Quest for Nuna Imaluk, Ancient Earth, follows the Inuit, the predominant society following an ecological collapse on Earth, as they wander the galaxy searching for a new home like the home of their legends. Chris lives in Climax, Saskatchewan, where in addition to writing, he builds guitars and plays in the Stayin' Alive choir. And lastly this evening, Jane Byers will read. Jane Byers lives with her wife, 2 children, and dog in Nelson, British Columbia. She writes about human resilience in the context of raising children, lesbian and gay issues, sexism, local geography, and health and safety in the workplace. She's worked for 25 years facilitating resilience in injured workers and preventing workplace injuries. Presently, she's an ergonomics consultant for Kootenai Health Services and a health and wellness consultant working with BC teachers. Jane has published 2 poetry collections and 1 chapbook, and has had poems, essays, and short fiction published in a variety of books and literary magazines. Her most recent book is titled Small Courage, a queer memoir of finding love and conceiving family. Thank you again to all of our writers that are reading for us this evening, and thank you to Gord McCall and the Lyric Theatre. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm C.J. Bueller, and I'll be reading to you today from my second novel, Quest for Nuna Imaluk. Before I begin, though, I'd like to thank Madeline Smid, Terry Taves, and Gordon McCall for making this opportunity available. The Quest is a story of the Inuit people of northern Canada many years into the future, a time when they are the predominant society on Earth, or Nuna as they call it in their language. At this point in the future, the world is once again suffering a general demise of the ecology, forcing these people to create huge spacecraft to take them in search of a new home planet. Their adventures arising from that search take them to places that span the entire spectrum of beauty and horror. But throughout their centuries of wandering, they maintain their desire to return to their traditional lives, as recorded in their legends. These explorations expose them to other societies, some of whom they fought, others from whom they learned a great deal of the vast permutations societies can undergo in adapting to their environments. They also learned to their dismay that some of these societies were much evolved and enjoying a much enriched level of consciousness. This lesson eventually became the catalyst for their society to aspire to something greater. The segment I will be reading is a pivotal point in the story where they are exposed to one such advanced society. The chapter is titled Fasija. Anya greeted them. I hope you are enjoying your visit. As you can see, we live an enriched life here. We are blessed with an abundant source of high-quality food and with a benign environment that is redolent with succulent plant life. I hope you have seen additional nutritional benefits for yourselves that you can employ when you return to your ships. If you choose to adopt this lifestyle, you will find that you are much calmer and more capable of dealing with whatever situation is at hand. In this case, I hope you find yourselves relaxed and alert for the upcoming negotiations. The room had small mangers containing food and beverage, but there were no places to sit. They gathered in a rough oval circle with Anya at the head. Indeed, Anya, we are surprised at how energized we feel. Abel looked around, gaining a sense of consensus. We haven't occupied a living, civilized planet for over 2,000 of our home planet's years. Our food has been produced artificially by combining the elements with the molecular patterns we recorded from the originals. Unfortunately, those foods had already been compromised by the artificial methods of agriculture used at the time. They aren't as nutritious as the original natural substances. The natural source foods had been long lost by the time we developed our replication technology. Anya pawed the ground thoughtfully. These are common problems among your evolutionary class of species. You seem possessed by the need to interfere in your planet's ecologies and to dominate all you encounter. Do not fear, we will provide the molecular patterns of our food for your replicators. You will find your strength and vitality are greatly enhanced. Abel smiled. We've already noticed significant increases in our energy levels. Excellent. Let us move on to discuss your ship's repairs. Once you've provided the engineering details of your time travel propulsion system, we will begin restoring your ships. Abel frowned, clearly concerned. You realize that time travel is our main tactical advantage over the ships we've encountered. We're afraid of facing ships in the future that you will have given the same technology. Anya nodded. I assure you, if you encounter such a ship, the capability will not have come from us. You will soon see as you depart that your ship is restored, but is in no way enhanced beyond its present tactical capabilities. Tan interjected, but you've already offered to enhance our food replicators and to help us improve. Anya interrupted. Indeed, however, this provides you only enhanced well-being, not tactical advantage. We are happy to share information of this type. Abel paused, taking stock of this creature. Her massive muscular body was alluring to him, even though she was unlike any living entity he had seen. Her demeanor was maddeningly attractive. His sensibilities detected only benign goodwill from her, yet it continued to nag at him how these denizens could be so relaxed in the face of the aggressive horrors they must encounter in the course of trading. He decided to give voice to his thoughts. You are curious what we do that makes us so certain that we can deal with armed battleships while remaining unarmed ourselves. I cannot reveal our defense strategies other than to tell you that we can avoid any attack with impunity. Abel pointed upward. The way you disappeared? That is one of many possible tactics, all of which are benign manipulations of your perception. We destroy nothing, ever. That is why we view your time travel technology with such great interest. It can be used effectively as a defense strategy, as you have proved, without inflicting death or suffering on anyone. She looked knowingly at Abel. The look was not lost on him. Abel realized she was emphasizing the redundancy of inflicting damage upon an aggressor. I see. You are, without doubt, the most engaging negotiator I have ever encountered. Abel realized as he spoke that he sounded as though he considered himself a seasoned negotiator. Noting her smile, he knew she was aware of his inexperience, but he pressed on, choosing to ignore the setback. Thus, I am tempted to comply with your wishes, but I am only the titular leader of my people. I must confer before committing them to a decision of this import. You wish me to leave you, she said, turning toward the exit. That is not necessary. The High Council, I am certain, see no need to debate in private. Am I correct in this assumption? He asked as he turned, surveying their faces. No one indicated concern, so he looked back to her. This will take but a moment. Members of High Council, do you object to providing our time travel technology to these people? Everyone indicated agreement with the transfer. Science team, do you retain any doubts? I remain cautious, Commander, Tan answered. As your tactician, I have difficulty accepting that someone who will negotiate the exchange of technology for repairs will not also negotiate weapons technology transfers for the right form of motivation. Anya looked into Tan's eyes for a moment before answering. You are a supremely talented tactician, Tan, with the experience of many battles to your credit. Tan blinked. He was certain his name had not been mentioned. Had she just read his mind? Your weakness, sir, is your ambition. This trait compromises your ability to be a leader of your people, although you are, without question, their leader in battle. As your leaders mature, she gestured to the High Council and Abel, you will find your skills are called upon less frequently. As for your question, the possibility does exist. I can only assure you that it will not happen. You must be beginning to understand that we have unusual capabilities. Your operation of your scanners should have told you that most of your tactics would be useless against us. If a warrior such as yourself could not penetrate our environment, you should see that others would have similar difficulty. Your profession is obsolete in our society. Given sufficient time, your species may evolve to this same state. As to rewards, what do you see that we lack? Tan made no response. He looked down at the smooth stone floor. Abel resumed the conversation. I think we've reached the point where we simply have to have faith in each other's good intentions. Anya smiled. Abel concluded, we'll provide the information you seek when the repairs are complete. Anya chuckled softly. The repairs will commence when we have received the information, not before. What you are proposing is a primitive protection strategy used between parties who profess agreement, but still mistrust one another. It will take us time to evaluate your information, during which your repairs will be completed. We must trust that the information you provide is accurate and you, no doubt, will hope that our repair workmanship will be to your satisfaction. The bonus I'm offering is our nutritional information. What are you offering as a bonus? What is it you seek? Your trust. She moved gracefully towards an exit, her muscles rippling smoothly. Abel did not delay or seek consensus for his response. Then you have it. When do we begin? Quest for Nuna Imaluk and my first novel, We Are Still Here, are available on Amazon. The quest is also available at friesenpress.com. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this little teaser.
Hello from Nelson, British Columbia. I am pleased to be reading at the Write Out Loud series in conjunction with the Lyric Theatre. I've never been to Swift Current, and I hope that someday I will get the opportunity to read in person and connect with my audience in a more intimate way than this technology allows. I've read in Saskatchewan once before. That was at the Saskatchewan Festival of Words in Moose Jaw a few years back, and I enjoyed every minute of it, including the Saskatchewan hospitality. Today I'm going to be reading from my new memoir, Small Courage. It came out in September of 2020 with Caitlin Press. It is my first foray into the memoir genre. Up until that time, I've written poetry. I've got a couple of poetry collections out there in the world, and it was a really fun new challenge to challenge myself to write in the memoir format. And, I studied it for a number of years. And when I was reading all the memoirs that I was reading, I was realizing that my story wasn't really told in any of those memoirs. And at that point, I had submitted a couple of personal essays to calls for submissions for anthologies about adoption or queer parenting, and they kept getting accepted. And at some point I thought, maybe I have a bigger story to tell here. And I started, thinking of writing a whole book rather than a couple of essays that were connected. So this is my memoir. It's called Small Courage, and it goes through my process of coming out in the 90s, finding love, and then our process, my wife's and my process of choosing to start a family through adoption, and then the trials and tribulations of adopting in the foster care system, where we were continually told that we were not the ideal family because we weren't a mom and a dad. And where, eventually when we were chosen as to be parents for Franny and Theo, our twins, we had to live for 2 weeks with an evangelical Christian foster parents who had fostered our kids since birth. So, that I thought, that's a good premise for a story. You put a same-sex couple and Christian foster parents together in the same small house and see what comes of it. So I'm going to start by reading from my preface of my book. On one of our favorite cloudy day family hikes, our daughter, Franny, tells a story. The hike is on a well-worn trail in Kokanee Creek Provincial Park. It winds through a mixed cedar forest, culminating in a waterfall. The creek sometimes rages and sometimes achieves a more mellow descent, though never a serene trickle. It certainly never dries up, nor do any creeks originating from glaciers in our inland temperate rainforest of southern British Columbia. Before we became parents, this would have been our mellow recovery hike the day after a 9-hour rugged lung buster in the Alpine. Telling stories on a hike is not uncommon now that we have children. I have had 9 years to grow accustomed to the endless chatter that I used to think of as an intrusion to my meditative and soul-cleansing walks in the woods. Our daughter insists on a story so she can distract herself from her own boredom with hiking, though often my wife and I are the ones tasked with telling those stories. Mama, will you tell me another story? It's your turn to tell us a story, Amy, my wife, answers. It's quiet for a minute, and I wonder if Franny is dreaming up a tale or has forgotten the question. Franny slows down in front of a fallen cedar, its splintered trunk still upright, and says, I am a baby animal, a puppy. I was born on that tree stump right there. My mother breastfed me. A few minutes later, Theo was born. Then a cougar killed our mother, and we were alone on the tree stump, but only for a few minutes. Then you came along and found us, and we became a forever family. How did it feel to be alone for 2 minutes? I eventually choke out after picking my jaw up off the trail and quelling my instinct to frame the question negatively. Were you scared? Is my first instinct. It was only 2 minutes, so it was okay, Franny says. Your birth mom died? Does it feel like she is dead in real life? I ask. Sometimes it feels like she's not really real, Franny answers. Franny's twin brother Theo says, Mom, look at the bird in the tree way up there, while continuing to whack dead branches that didn't make it through the long winter. What kind of a bird is it, buddy? I ask, my eyes too full of tears to see the dirty snow still clinging to the northwest aspect of rocks and cedars, the vibrant green of new growth on the first saplings, or the bird. I don't know, maybe a chickadee? Maybe, I say vaguely, non-committal, as I digest what Franny has just told us. I don't think it's a coincidence that she told an origin story after spending a week of family time together over spring break, during which the 4 of us were tuned into one another in attachment parenting bliss. Franny is creating a story in which she is resilient. Apparently, her 10-year-old self can manage resilience for 2 minutes. If this is true, I have given her something besides increasing her tolerance for hikes, which has been no small feat in itself. She often says she'd rather be at the mall, which is the place she used to stroll and walk as a toddler with her foster family. My first poetry collection, Stealing Effects, was an attempt not only to answer the question of how any of us, and I in particular, ended up resilient, but also to leave a metaphorical roadmap for my children. Whatever difficult stories the twins will come to learn about their early beginnings and biological family history, they will also know they come from resilience. Let this be their inheritance. All right, so I'm going to read a second excerpt here that has us meeting the foster parents for the very first time in order to give them an opportunity to get to know us and be a bit more comfortable with us. Eventually, we made the long, snowy drive to Kelowna to show the foster family we didn't have snakes for hair and to answer any questions they had about us. After many months of being in this process, we sat in a government boardroom with beige walls and a view of Kelowna sprawl, and met the twins' foster parents. She was soft-featured, maternal, and smiling. He, thin, angular, and slightly combative. Both had thick Scottish accents. They sat at one end of the large table and we at the other, buffered by 3 social workers. It was the most important job interview of our lives. The foster parents' accents put me at some ease. Fundamentalism wrapped in a Scottish accent was more palatable to me somehow, or perhaps it was my inclination, when face to face, to find the common ground, knowing that whatever our topical differences, we humans share many more commonalities. So, you're Scottish, I asked. Yeah, is that a problem for you? The foster dad answered. No, as long as the kids aren't fed deep-fried Mars bars, I said, chuckling. I'm from Northern England, and in fact my ancestors fought as mercenaries in the border wars, and our family was granted the right of wearing the tartans as one of the clans. Which one? Asked the foster dad. I'm sorry, I don't remember. It's blue and yellow. Can you tell us about the twins? What are they like? Amy asked. They are cute. The boy is Mr. Energy Efficient, a little more laid back. He likes the rhythm in Indian music, the foster mom said, smiling. The girl is Miss Energy. She crawls over him and steals his bottle and his blankie. They have little silky snuggle rabbits the size of face cloths. She also takes care of him, he added. Although not relaxed, the meeting proceeded well until one of them asked, What will you do if your children grow up to be straight? Amy pleaded with me with her eyes. I fielded this question. I'm not a ballet dancer, but if one of my kids turns out to be, I'd be happy for them. I exchanged a quick glance with Amy. Chances are they will be straight. That's totally fine. We just want our kids to be happy. Despite the questions from left field, it was clear the foster parents loved the twins, whom they'd fostered since shortly after birth. We began to form a picture of the twins in our mind, but hadn't yet seen a photo, which felt excruciating and also protective. So just in case you were on the edge of your seat with wondering whether the adoption worked out, it did. And the foster parents and us are now good friends, which gives me great hope for the world. If people from radically different belief systems and backgrounds can come together and find their common ground, and especially all wanting the same thing. We were all highly motivated by our love for our kids. So if you want to hear about the rest of it, I guess you'll have to buy the book, which you can do at your favorite independent bookstore or directly from Caitlin Press online. You can also buy it at really any of the bookstores. Indigo has it as well. And again, I want to thank the organizers of Write Out Loud for this opportunity, and thank you for tuning in.
Wasn't that great, ladies and gentlemen? A big thank you to our authors, Bev, Bruce, Angie, Chris, and Jane, and of course to our host for this evening, Diane Miller, and to Terry Taves and the Write Out Loud committee for making this all happen. We appreciate you so much, and we appreciate you at home for supporting us throughout these difficult times and hopefully enjoying these programs. Your response has told us that you are, so that's great. This is our first and hopefully last COVID Christmas, but in the spirit of family and togetherness and love and happiness, we want to wish everyone at home a happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and for whatever other belief you might have, the spirit of the holidays, from us to you. As you know, we may not get the vaccines as early as they say. Hopefully we will, but in the quantity that will allow us to have everyone who needs to be vaccinated to get the vaccines, that could be still a few months. So if you could and are able to support us financially, all you have to do is write a check or money order to the Lyric Theatre at Box 1143, Swift Current, Saskatchewan, S9H 3X3, or just send an e-transfer to treasure@lyrictheatre.ca. We so appreciate everyone who has supported us and who will be supporting us. We couldn't do this without you. So thank you. And have happy holidays. And let us all think about blue skies ahead in the new year, 2021. We wish you a happy new year if we don't see you before then. All right, everyone. Have a great holiday season. Thank you. On behalf of everyone here at The Lyric.